I thought I was coming home to surprise the woman I loved. Instead, I found my best friend's car sitting in my driveway. At first, I smiled. Jason had been my best friend for 20 years. He practically had a key to my house. But as I walked toward the front door with flowers in my hand, I heard something that made me stop cold. Rachel laughed. Then Jason said, "He'll never figure it out." The flowers slipped from my hand. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, but 2 days later, my bank account proved I hadn't. Almost every dollar I'd spent 3 years saving for our dream home was gone. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how the two people I trusted most stole my future, and how the truth turned out to be even worse than betrayal. But to understand how two people I trusted could do that to me, you need to know what my life looked like before that night. For years earlier, Rachel and I were just two people trying to build something together. We weren't wealthy. I worked as a project supervisor for a construction company outside Columbus, Ohio. Rachel worked at a small marketing firm downtown. We rented a modest apartment and talked constantly about the life we'd have someday. Then, one Sunday afternoon, we drove past a small 3-bedroom house with white siding, a wooden porch, and a huge oak tree in the backyard. Rachel made me stop the car. She stood outside the fence staring at it and said, "Ethan, can you imagine our kids playing under that tree?" I can still remember the way she smiled. That evening, I made her a promise. "Give me a few years. I'll get us a place like this." From that moment on, I started taking every overtime shift I could get. I stopped buying things I didn't need. I skipped vacations. Within 3 years, I'd saved nearly $38,000. And Rachel knew exactly where every dollar was kept. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was going to be my wife. But Rachel wasn't the only person who knew about that money. There was one other person I trusted enough to tell. Jason, my best friend since I was 12. And looking back, I'll never forget the strange question he asked me the night I told him how much I'd saved. Jason stared at me for a second and asked, "Does Rachel have access to that account?" I laughed. "Of course. We're getting married." "Why?" He took a sip of his beer and shrugged. "No reason. 38 grand is just a lot of money." At the time, nothing about that conversation bothered me. Jason had been my best friend since 7th grade. We'd survived everything together: bad jobs, breakups, family problems. When his father died, I stayed at his house for almost a week. When I lost my first job, Jason covered part of my rent without asking when I'd pay him back. He wasn't just my friend. I considered him my brother. That's why I never worried about how close he and Rachel had become. If I worked late, Jason sometimes stopped by our apartment. He'd help fix something, bring dinner, or keep Rachel company. I actually appreciated it. Then, one night, I came home around 10:30. Jason was sitting on our sofa. Rachel was beside him. The moment I opened the door, they both stopped talking. Jason stood up almost immediately. "Long day?" he asked. "Yeah. What were you two talking about?" Rachel smiled. "Your birthday. You almost ruined the surprise." I laughed and apologized. Jason left a few minutes later. But when I walked into the bedroom, I noticed Rachel quickly hiding something inside the drawer of her nightstand. "What was that?" I asked. "Nothing. I should have opened that drawer." Instead, I trusted her. 3 days later, one of my coworkers pulled me aside at work. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I saw Rachel yesterday." Then he hesitated. She wasn't alone. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean she wasn't alone?" My coworker, Mark, looked uncomfortable. "I saw her having lunch downtown with some guy. I almost came over to say hello, but they seemed pretty close." I tried to laugh it off. "Was he tall? Brown hair? Black jacket?" Mark nodded. I immediately knew who it was. Jason. For a second, that strange question he'd asked about my savings came back to me. Then I pushed it away. "That's my best friend," I told Mark. "They're probably planning something for my birthday." And honestly, I believe that. That evening, I casually asked Rachel how her day had been. "Busy," she said. "I ate lunch at my desk." I stopped eating. She had no reason to lie about lunch. I could have confronted her right then, but I wanted to see if she'd correct herself. She didn't. Later that night, while Rachel was showering, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. A message appeared on the screen. It was from Jason. "We need to be more careful. Ethan's starting to notice things." My hands went cold. Before I could unlock the phone, Rachel walked into the kitchen and grabbed it. For the first time in 5 years, I looked at the woman I planned to marry and wondered if I actually knew her. The next morning, I called Jason. I didn't mention the message. I simply asked him one question. Where were you yesterday at noon? There was a long silence. Then Jason gave me an answer that changed my suspicion into fear. Jason finally answered. I was home most of the day. Why? That was the moment something inside me changed. Mark had seen him with Rachel downtown. Rachel told me she'd eaten lunch at her desk. Now, Jason was telling me he'd been home. Two people I trusted were lying about the same afternoon. Still, I didn't confront him. Nothing, I said. Just thought I saw your truck downtown. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Wasn't me, brother. Brother. That word suddenly felt different. For the next few days, I acted normal. I went to work, kissed Rachel goodbye, and answered Jason's text like nothing had happened. But I started paying attention. Then Saturday morning, Jason came over to help me move some tools. While he was inside, I walked to his truck to grab a toolbox from the back seat. That's when I saw something wedged beside the passenger seat. A thin gold bracelet. I recognized it immediately. I'd given it to Rachel on our 3rd anniversary. When Jason returned, I held it up. His face changed for half a second. Then he smiled. Oh, Rachel must have dropped it when I drove her home last week. Drove her home from where? His smile disappeared. Before he could answer, Rachel came outside. She saw the bracelet in my hand and went completely still. That night, they gave me an explanation, and somehow I almost believed it. Until 2:13 the next morning, when my phone buzzed with an alert from my bank. Someone had moved $4,800 out of my savings account. I sat up in bed and read the notification again. Transfer completed for $1,800. For a few seconds, I thought it had to be a mistake. Rachel was asleep beside me, or at least she looked like she was. I opened the banking app. The money had been transferred from the account holding our house savings into an account I didn't recognize. My first thought was fraud. I immediately locked the account. The next morning, I called the bank. The representative checked the transaction and said something that made me grip the phone tighter. Mr. Miller, this transfer appears to have been authorized using your account credentials. That's impossible. I was asleep. She explained that the correct password and security information had been used. Only 2 people knew enough about that account. Me and Rachel. I walked into the kitchen and showed her the transaction. Her face went pale. Ethan, I have no idea what that is. Did you move this money? No. She sounded genuinely offended. For a moment, I hated myself for suspecting her. Then she hugged me and whispered, "Call the bank again. Someone must have hacked us." I wanted desperately to believe her. Later that afternoon, I searched my email for anything connected to the transfer. That's when I found a security notification from 3 weeks earlier. A new recovery phone number had been added to my account. I didn't recognize the number, but when I searched in my contacts, my stomach dropped. It belonged to Jason. And suddenly, his strange question about whether Rachel had access to my savings didn't seem strange anymore. I stared at Jason's number on my screen until my hand started shaking. There had to be an explanation. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. I didn't confront Rachel or Jason. Not yet. If they were really hiding something, I wanted to know how deep it went. So I changed my banking password, removed Jason's number, and called the bank again. They opened a fraud investigation and told me not to share my new login with anyone. For the first time in my relationship, I kept something from Rachel. That evening, she asked, "Did the bank figure it out?" "They're still investigating." She nodded, but instead of looking worried, she looked relieved. That bothered me more than anything. 2 days later, something even stranger happened. Rachel texted me around noon. "Working late tonight?" I replied, "Probably until 10. Almost immediately, Jason texted, "Long shift again, brother?" I stare at both messages. Maybe it was coincidence. So elite. Yeah, won't be home before 10. But at 5:45, I quietly left work. On the way home, I stopped at Rachel's favorite flower shop. Some part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe I'd walk through the door, hand her the flowers, and feel ridiculous for doubting everyone. Then I turned on my street. My heart sank. Jason's truck was parked near my driveway. I killed the engine and walked toward the house. Before I reached the front door, I heard Rachel laughing inside. Then Jason spoke. Once the rest of the money is moved, Ethan won't be able to stop us. I froze, because suddenly I realized this was much bigger than an affair. I stood outside my own front door, barely breathing. For 1 second, I wondered if I had misunderstood him. Then Rachel answered, "We can't move the rest yet." He already noticed the first transfer. Jason lowered his voice, but I could still hear him. "Then we do it before the bank finishes investigating." My stomach turned. This wasn't just about Rachel cheating on me. They were talking about my savings. 3 years of overtime. Missed weekends. Nearly every extra dollar I'd earned. I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording. Then Rachel said something I still remember word for word. "What if Ethan finds the documents?" Jason laughed. "He won't. You said he never checks that drawer." The drawer. Immediately, I remembered the night I'd seen Rachel hide something in her nightstand. I wanted to kick the door open and confront them both, but something stopped me. If there were documents, I needed to see them first. So I walked back to my truck and waited. 20 minutes later, Jason came outside. Rachel kissed him at the door. That was all the confirmation I needed. But I stayed hidden until he drove away. When I finally entered the house, Rachel smiled like nothing had happened. "You're home early." "Yeah, job got finished faster than expected." I even handed her the flowers. Then I waited until she went downstairs to do laundry. I walked into our bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer. Under a stack of old receipts was a sealed folder. Inside were copies of my bank statements, a transfer form, and my signature, except I had never signed it. Then I saw another document underneath. It wasn't from the bank. It had the address of the house Rachel and I had dreamed about buying. And beside the buyer's name were 2 words. Jason Cole. I read Jason's name 3 times. Then I noticed Rachel's name on the next page. They had already contacted the seller. The house I had spent 3 years saving for, the house Rachel once said our children would grow up in, was being discussed as a purchase without me. Using my money. My hands were shaking, but I photographed every page and put the folder exactly where I found it. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called the realtor whose name appeared on the paperwork. I pretended I was simply checking on the property. She hesitated. "Mr. Miller, I thought you decided not to move forward." "I did. Rachel told us your engagement was ending." She and Mr. Cole asked whether they could make an offer themselves. I couldn't speak. Then she added something worse. "They said part of the down payment was a gift from you." A gift. Jason and Rachel weren't just planning to take my savings. They were planning to use my money to buy the future Rachel had promised me. I contacted the bank's fraud department again and sent them the documents. Then I called an attorney. He gave me one instruction. Don't confront them yet. Preserve everything. So for another 24 hours, I lived beside Rachel and pretended I knew nothing. Then, while she was showering, her phone lit up. A message from Jason appeared. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., bring Ethan's ID copy in the second form." But beneath that notification was another message from a woman named Melissa. It said, "Rachel, you need to know what Jason did to my brother before you give him another $1." I stared at Melissa's message until Rachel's shower turned off. I didn't have time to open it. I stepped away from the phone and acted normal, but one thought followed me all night. What had Jason done to Melissa's brother? The next morning, Rachel left earlier than usual. She told me she had a client meeting. I knew better. At 8:40, I followed her from a distance. She drove straight to a coffee shop across town. Jason was already there. But before I could decide what to do, someone knocked on my passenger window. A woman I'd never seen before stood outside. "Are you Ethan Miller?" My heart started pounding. "Who are you?" "Melissa Grant." I unlocked the door. She sat down and looked toward Jason through the windshield. My brother trusted that man, too. Melissa told me Jason had worked with her brother, Daniel, 2 years earlier. They planned to start a small business together. Daniel invested almost $25,000. Then Jason disappeared. So did the money. Daniel never had enough evidence to prove what happened. I felt sick. "Why are you contacting Rachel?" "Because Jason is doing it again." Then Melissa handed me a folder. Inside were old bank records, messages, and copies of signatures that looked disturbingly familiar. But the last page stopped me cold. It showed an account connected to Jason, the same account that had received my missing $4,800. I looked across the parking lot at the man I had called my brother for 20 years. Melissa leaned closer. There's something else, Ethan. She pointed at Rachel. I don't think she knows the whole plan. And suddenly, I realized I might not be Jason's only target. What do you mean Rachel doesn't know? Melissa looked through the windshield. Jason doesn't just steal money. He makes people believe they're building something with him first. That sentence hit me hard. I hated what Rachel had done. She had lied to me, betrayed our engagement, and helped access money that wasn't hers. But what if Jason was also using her? Melissa showed me messages Daniel had recovered years ago. Jason had promised another partner a new business, a fresh start, even a house. The language sounded almost identical to what I'd overheard him telling Rachel. Then Rachel and Jason walked out of the coffee shop. She looked nervous. Jason looked completely calm. Before they separated, Rachel handed him a large envelope. My ID copy. The second form. I photographed the exchange. Then Melissa said, "Call your bank." Now. I did. The fraud investigator placed an immediate restriction on the savings account. And we were just in time. Someone had attempted another transfer that morning. $31,600. Almost everything I had left. The transfer had been blocked. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Then the investigator asked me something unexpected. "Mr. Miller, do you know a company called Cole Development Group?" "No." There was a pause. "You should speak with your attorney before doing anything else. We found attempted transfers connected to that company." "How many?" She hesitated. "Yours isn't the only account." That afternoon, I gave my attorney everything, Melissa's records, my recording, the forged paperwork. He studied it quietly. Then he looked at me. "Ethan, this may be much bigger than you're missing $4,800. And before the day was over, another person came forward with Jason's name. The other person was a man named Daniel Grant, Melissa's brother. He sat across from me in my attorney's office holding a worn folder. "I should have stopped Jason years ago," he said. Daniel explained that Jason hadn't simply stolen his $25,000. Jason had convinced him to invest in Cole Development Group, a company that supposedly bought and renovated small properties. The projects never existed. Then Daniel showed me something that made the room go silent. A document from 2 years earlier. The signature at the bottom looked like Daniel's. It wasn't. Same slant. Same careful imitation. Exactly like the signature on my transfer form. My attorney immediately began organizing everything for the investigators. But I still had one question. If Jason's done this before, why involve Rachel? Daniel looked at me. Because he needed someone close enough to you to get what he couldn't. My passwords. My documents. My ID. Suddenly, Rachel's role became painfully clear. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had opened the door for him. That evening, I returned home. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. On the table was the folder from our bedroom. "You went through this," she said. I didn't answer. Then she pushed her phone toward me. There was a message from Jason on the screen. "Transfer failed. Ethan knows. Get out of the house tonight." Rachel looked terrified, but underneath Jason's message was something else. A photograph he had accidentally sent her. It showed an airline confirmation. 1 passenger. 1 ticket. Jason Cole. And the flight was leaving the next morning. Rachel wasn't going with him. Rachel stared at the airline confirmation as if she couldn't understand what she was seeing. "He told me we were leaving together," she whispered. I felt no satisfaction watching her realize the truth. "Leaving with what, Rachel?" "My money." She looked down. For the first time, she stopped making excuses. She admitted the affair had started months earlier. Jason told her I cared more about work than about her. Then he convinced her we could afford to lose part of the savings because, according to him, she had helped build our future too. But Rachel had gone further than that. She gave him copies of my ID. She helped him access my account. And she copied my signature. "I thought we were buying the house," she said quietly. "You were. Just without me." She couldn't look at me. Then I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. "Why $4,800 first?" Rachel frowned. "What do you mean?" "The first transfer." Her face changed. "I never transferred $4,800. Now it was my turn to go silent. Rachel showed me every message between her and Jason. Their plan had been to move the larger amount the next morning. The $4,800 wasn't part of it. Jason had taken that money himself. He had been stealing from both of us before their plan was even finished. I immediately called my attorney. He told me not to contact Jason, but Jason was already moving. At 6:17 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Melissa. Ethan, Jason never boarded his flight. Then where is he? There was a pause. I think I know. 20 minutes later, she sent me an address. When I saw it, my blood ran cold. It was the address of our dream house. I drove to the address, but I didn't go alone. My attorney had already told me not to confront Jason, so I stayed across the street and called the investigator handling the case. Jason's truck was parked outside. Seeing it there felt almost cruel. This was the house Rachel and I had once stood outside dreaming about. The oak tree was still there. The porch was exactly how I remembered it. But Jason was inside. A few minutes later, another car pulled up. A woman stepped out. It wasn't Rachel. She looked about 30, carried a folder, and walked straight toward Jason when he came outside. Then she hugged him. I took a photo. Melissa, sitting beside me, whispered, "I know her." Her name was Lauren Pierce. According to Melissa, Lauren's father owned several rental properties around Columbus. Suddenly, everything made sense. Jason hadn't come here because he loved this house. He was already looking for his next source of money. The investigator arrived shortly afterward. I handed over everything I had and left before Jason saw me. By that evening, Rachel had packed her things. Before walking out, she placed her engagement ring on the kitchen counter. "I know saying sorry means nothing now," she said. She was right. I didn't yell. I didn't ask her to stay. I simply closed the door behind her. Within weeks, my relationship was over, my friendship with Jason was dead, and the future I'd spent years building had disappeared. The investigation continued, but I stopped waiting for justice to rebuild my life. I started over. 3 years later, I owned a small construction company of my own. Then one Monday morning, my receptionist called. "Ethan, there's a man here asking for you." "Who?" She paused. "Jason Cole." And she added something I never expected. "He says he needs a job." For a few seconds, I thought I had heard her wrong. Jason Cole, the man who had betrayed me, helped destroy my engagement, and tried to take almost everything I had saved, was sitting outside my office asking me for a job. "Send him in." When the door opened, I barely recognized him. Jason had always been confident, the kind of man who walked into a room like he owned it. That man was gone. His clothes were worn. His face looked exhausted. "Hey, Ethan." I said nothing. He sat across from me. "I know I'm the last person you want to see. Then why are you here?" He looked at the floor. After the investigation, Jason had been forced to repay money tied to several disputed transactions. His business collapsed. Lauren disappeared from his life when his financial problems surfaced. Then he told me something I hadn't expected. Rachel had contacted him again. "She came back about 8 months ago," he said. "I felt nothing when I heard her name." "What does that have to do with me?" Jason swallowed. "She said she wanted to make things right." Then he laughed bitterly. I believed her. According to Jason, Rachel convinced him to put what little money he had left into a business opportunity. Weeks later, both Rachel and the money were gone. The irony was impossible to miss. The man who helped betray me had finally learned what betrayal felt like. But Jason hadn't come just to ask for work. He reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on my desk. "Rachel told me to give you this if I ever saw you." My name was written across the front. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Before opening it, I noticed a date in the corner. The letter had been written nearly 3 years earlier, before Rachel ever went back to Jason. And the first sentence made me realize there was still one secret I had never been told. The first sentence read, "Ethan, Jason didn't choose your savings account by accident." I looked up at him. His face went pale. I kept reading. Rachel wrote that months before their affair began, Jason had been asking her questions about my job, my savings, and whether I still planned to buy the house. At first, she thought he was just being friendly. Then he started telling her I would eventually leave her once my career took off. She believed him. That didn't excuse what she did, and Rachel admitted it. "I betrayed you because I was selfish, insecure, and willing to believe the person telling me what I wanted to hear." But the final paragraph revealed something else. Jason had once applied for a supervisor position at my company. The position had gone to me. I remembered it immediately. I just never knew Jason had wanted it. According to Rachel, that was when his questions about my money began. I lowered the letter. Was this about Rachel? I asked. Or were you trying to hurt me? Jason stared at the floor. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "At first, I wanted what you had. The job, everything. My career, my savings, Rachel, even a house." He had spent years calling me his brother while quietly comparing his life to mine. Then Jason looked at me and said, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just need a chance to work." 3 years earlier, I would have dreamed about this moment. Jason broken, me holding all the power. But sitting there, I realized revenge didn't feel anything like I had imagined. I opened his resume, looked at it for a few seconds, and made my decision. And what I told him surprised even me. I closed Jason's resume and slid it back across the desk. "I forgive you," I said. His eyes lifted. "But you're not working for me." He looked disappointed, but I continued. "Forgiveness doesn't mean I have to put my future back in the hands of someone who already tried to take it." Jason nodded slowly. Before he left, I gave him the number of a local employment program I knew. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't friendship either. It was simply the end. After the door closed, I read Rachel's letter one last time and put it away. I never contacted her. The $4,800 was eventually recovered through the investigation, but by then, the money didn't matter nearly as much as it once had. I had rebuilt everything. My company was growing. I had bought my own home, not the White House with the oak tree, but a place I chose for myself. Funny enough, it had a tree in the backyard too. Sometimes I sit beneath it after work and think about the man I used to be. The guy working 12-hour shifts because he believed one house, one woman, and one friendship were his entire future. I was wrong. Rachel betrayed my love. Jason betrayed 20 years of friendship. They almost took my savings. But they never took the one thing that mattered most. My ability to start again. If betrayal has taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes losing the people you planned your future with is exactly how you finally find your own future.